Hello, everybody. I've been wanting to do a little more teaching in English since most of the stuff that I've taught is on videos and on YouTube in Nepali, but nothing is in English. And since I moved to Canada, it's about time that I start doing some teaching in English. And so I wanted to go through the book of Revelation because that's a topic I think that's very important at this time, since every single day we're getting closer to the end times, and so Revelation becomes more and more important. And Revelation is not talked about so much anymore in the churches. It's not studied so much, and so it's something that we should take a look at. I'm going to start today just by giving you an overview of what I think the book looks like. The book of Revelation is a book of prophecy, so it's stated right off the bat. It is a book of prophecy, so it's talking about something that is going to come. It is not a commentary on how things were back then when it was written. And it's something to be taken seriously. It's something to be read. The book of Revelation, it skips around between things that happen on earth and things that happen in heaven. And so when you read it, you're jumping back from heaven to a scenery, things that are happening in heaven, and you jump back on earth to see what's going on earth, and then you jump back into a vision of heaven. And so it goes up and down between visions of heaven, what's happening up there, and then what's happening down on earth. And it comes in groups of 7. So 7 is the number of completion. And so this completes the Bible. It's the end prophecy. It's the end of times. And so the work of God will be complete after the book of Revelation. So it comes in 3 groups of 7. The first group of 7 is the seals that are being opened in chapter 4 and 5. John sees in the hand of God a scroll. And in that scroll is closed with 7 seals. He's weeping and saying, like, who's worthy of opening these seals? No one can open these seals and see inside. What's written inside is the end times. It's what's going to happen in the end times. And so the first 7, the 7 seals, when you open these seals, you haven't reached the end time yet. And we'll be able to see that as we study the Bible, that the 7 seals are not part of the end time. The 7 seals are bringing about the end time. Once the 7th seal is broken, then comes the 7 trumpets, which is starting the tribulation, which starts the end time. There's 3 sets of 7 here. It's a little bit like we're giving a pattern of this in the Battle of Jericho, when Joshua and the Israelites are supposed to circle around the city of Jericho. They have to go around the city of Jericho once every day for 6 days, and on the 7th day they have to go 7 times. So we have a group of 7, and in that group of 7 there's 7. And this pattern that you see in this battle, in this group of 7, you see in the book of Revelation. So you have 7 seals that are holding in on this scroll. And when you open the 7th seal, in that 7th seal, there's 7 trumpets. And so you have the 6 trumpets, and in the 7th trumpet, you have the 7 bowls of God's wrath. So you have, in the 7, there's a 7, and in that 7, there's another 7. And that's how we're to understand this book. It doesn't skip back and forth chronologically. It continues. So at the beginning you have the 7 seals, and as you open the 7 seals, it's the time of the birth pains, and the end has not come, and the book is not open yet. And then you get to chapter 8. The 7th seal is opened, and when you open the 7th seal, you got in that 7th seal you got 7 trumpets. You see, so it's inside of it. And at that point you have half an hour of silence in heaven, because the end has come at that point. And that's where you have the 7 trumpets. And in the 7th trumpet, you have the 7 last plagues and the bowls of wrath of God. The way I see it is that the first 7, the end has not come yet. The second 7 of trumpets, that's the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. And the last 7, which are the bowls of God's wrath, they're the last 3.5 years of the 7-year tribulation. And then you go on after that, after the seals, there's the actual end of all things, the judgment day, the millennium, the judgment day, and the new heaven and the new earth. Chapter 1 is an introduction. Chapter 2 and 3, we got the church age, and this is the most important verses for you and I. because chapter 2 and 3 is a description of the church across the age. So it describes the church right now, when we're living right now. But at any given time in history, this is what the church is like, and this is what the Spirit says to the churches. So chapter 2 and 3 are incredibly important. And they're the only chapters that directly talk to the church. Basically, the rest, the church is not present there. We have to study it because we have to know what's coming, but it's not necessarily for us. It's about the time when the church will no longer be there. Chapter 4 and 5, then we go up to heaven, and there we see the seals, and we see that God is holding the seal, and no one's worthy to break it. And then the Lamb of God comes, and He's worthy to break the seals. And so these seals start opening. And when these seals are open, the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the 7 bowls, usually they come in groups of 4 and 3. You got four that are kind of like what's happening on earth, and you got 3 that are more of a spiritual meaning behind them. The first 4 seals are things that happen on this earth, and they're very, very similar with Matthew 24, with the signs of the end times. So these are signs that things are happening, that the ends are coming. We have the white horse, the coming of the Antichrist, a false prophet. We have a fiery red horse, which brings wars and rumors of wars. You're gonna hear the exact same words as Matthew 24, where Jesus says, in the end times, you're gonna see false teachers. That's the white horse, the spirit of Antichrist. You're gonna see wars and rumors of wars, which is exactly what he says. The third black horse is famine, so famines and plagues. That's what Matthew 24 says. And then the fourth pale horse is death by sword, famine, plague, and that also coincides with Matthew 24, 1-14. So the seals are not the end yet. The seals are the opening of the end. The end is coming. It's the beginning of the birth pains. Seal 5 and 6 are more of a spiritual kind, although there is a description of what mankind does. In the seal 5, you go back to heaven, and there you see martyrs, and the martyrs are crying out, saying, God, when are you going to punish the world for what they've done? And God just says, just wait. So in this also, we see that up to chapter 6, we see that the end has not come. They're still waiting for this come. They're still waiting for the tribulation. They're waiting for the final judgment. It has not come. And the 6th seal, we go back on earth, and people are hiding. There's signs in the stars and the sky and stuff like that, which could be a reference of spiritual work. But yet, people know that the final day has come. So we see that the opening of these seals are the start of the end. The end has not quite yet come. Then we go to chapter 7, and finally we see the church, which is in heaven now. So somewhere between chapter 6 and 7, the church has been raptured. From chapter 7 on, the church is no longer on the earth. So during the tribulation, the first half and the second half, for the trumpets and for the seals, the church is no longer there. And we have the 144,000, which we'll talk about later in detail. And the church in heaven is seen in chapter 7. Chapter 8 is the start of the trumpets, and it's also the start of the tribulation, and the end times starts then. So this is where actually the scroll is completely opened. And when the scroll is completely open, there's 7 trumpets, and there's 7 bowls of wrath that come. And this is the beginning of the 7-year tribulation. And this is why there's half an hour of silence in heaven, because it's dreadful. It's the time of judgment has come. Again, the first 4 trumpets are earthly events, and the last 2 are more demonic. They're more spiritual. They're of a spiritual kind. So you have the opening of the 7th seal is the coming of the 7 trumpets. You have the first trumpet. It's a third of the world is set on fire. The second trumpet, a third of the sea. A third trumpet, a third of the water. A fourth trumpet, a third of the sun, the moon, and the stars. So here are all things that happen to physical things on earth. But then you have the fifth trumpet, and it describes demonic locusts that come out of the abyss, and they torture mankind. And this is a torture that's demonic. And the way also I see this is that the Antichrist has come, and he's showing his power, and he's taking control. And this is part of it. His demonic forces are taking over the world at this time. He's been given 3.5 years to rule. and he's going to use that time, and he's going to bring out his demonic forces. The sixth trumpet, you have 200 million demonic forces. Okay, so you got this army coming out. So Antichrist is showing his power in chapter 9. Then you have chapter 10. You have a break on things, and there's we talk about a scroll again here, and then you have chapter 11 where you talk about the witnesses, and I still believe it's during the first 3.5 years where there's going to be witnesses on earth. During the 3.5 years of the tribulation, the church will not be there to witness anymore, but the 144,000 Jews will be there, and the witnesses, the two witnesses, will come, and they will announce the gospel. The witness come, and then the seventh trumpet goes off, which we know that the seventh trumpet is bringing about the 7 bowls of God's wrath. These 7 bowls do not come until chapter 15, so there's quite a gap there for a bit. Then there's chapter 12. That's a real. It's like an overview of beginning to end. It's a break that gives an overview of everything that's happened from the beginning to the end. And then chapter 13 is a very descriptive passage that tells you how the Antichrist has come to power and what he will do. So what has happened up to this 3.5 years, and during this 3.5 years, what he's going to do. He's going to set up an image of himself, and the world's going to follow him. And there's going to be one religion and one government and all this stuff. That's in chapter 13. Chapter 14. The 144,000 are taken up into heaven. They're probably raptured or killed, but we see them in heaven. The 3 angels go down to earth, and they proclaim the gospel. Chapter 15, there's the 7 final plagues on the earth. Again, we got 4 plagues that are physical and 3 plagues that are a little more spiritual. The first plague is that there's sores, and sores on people came out, so like a plague of sores. Second plague is 100% of the sea turns to blood, so no drinking water, even the drinking water turns to blood. That's plague number 3. Plague number 4, there's the sun that scorches people, and yet people refuse to repent. We have the last 3 plagues, and the 5th plague, the darkness comes over the kingdom of the beast. And the 6th plague, they gather for fighting. They gather to fight Armageddon. On the 7th plague, there's a huge earthquake, and the mountains and islands flee away. It's just a huge earthquake, and at this point, probably Jesus steps in to fight this battle and win. 17, 18, 19, we have a break again. It talks about the woman riding the beast. It talks about the fall of Babylon. So just as the world government is falling, it's crumbling in the last 3.5 years. Babylon has fallen. The peace that they thought they were getting with the Antichrist, they're not getting. And everything's being destroyed, and there's weeping, and there's gnashing of teeth to a certain extent. It's the start. So the fall of Babylon. Babylon is fallen. And then chapter 19, we have the coming of Jesus to fight Armageddon, and he binds Satan up for 1,000 years. So here we have our tribulation is finished. Our 3.5 first years, which were the trumpets, and the last 3.5 years, which are the bowls of God's wrath. These are done, and so we have the battle of Armageddon, and then we have the end times that come. So chapter 20, 21, and 22 are telling us about the end times. They're telling us about the 1,000 years of peace. They tell us about Judgment Day, so the battle of Gog and Magog, the Judgment Day, and the new heaven and the new earth. So chapter 20 is the 1,000 years of Christ's reign here on earth, like literal reign on earth, and we'll be studying that. Chapter 20 is the end of that, where Satan is released. People again turn against God, and there's another battle called Gog and Magog, and there's the final battle, and then there's Judgment Day, which we see in chapter 20, 11 to 15. Chapter 21, there's the New Jerusalem that comes down, and mind you, I gotta say this, I'll say it again, but it's a new heaven and a new earth. The new Jerusalem does not come on this heaven and this earth. This heaven and this earth is completely destroyed, and there's a new heaven and a new earth that come on in chapter 21 and chapter 22. That is a description of what we would refer to as heaven, but actually it's a new heaven and a new earth. So that gives you a short overview of what we're going to be studying in the next several months. We'll see how much time I get to record.